So without further ado, let's welcome Ameen to tell you about Ethereum's cultural victory. Please give him a big round of applause.
Good afternoon. I don't really know why people keep giving me the microphone. They should have learned better by now. I have a job. It's called Oxbow right now. I build privacy tools. This talk is not about that. This talk is about something that I think is upstream of all of the problems that we have. This talk is about culture. So this talk is about Ethereum cultural victory. I want to talk about how I play civilization. My favorite way to win civilization is by winning through a cultural victory, which means you build a lot of wonders of the world, you have rock stars, you put on shows, a lot of stuff like that. But you always have to be careful, because the religious fanatics will win a religious victory before you win a cultural victory. And so what I like to do, some people who play cultural games, they think it's always about peace, and I do not. My favorite way to do this is to take out all of the religious fanatics, take over their wonders, and then go back to building my own wonders. So Vitalik set me free, like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. Can you guys see these slides? Is that hard to see? Can you see? Thumbs up? Yes? Okay, cool. I was calling out Gitcoin communists, which I do all the time, and Awaki, who's in this blocked, made a reference to Vitalik's April Fool's Degen Communism blog post, and then Vitalik followed up with his now infamous joke tweet that Jill had, "Make communism great again." And I finally realized who I was actually fighting. And the reason I was pissed off is because I thought I was presenting reasonable criticisms of commie culture, and they were not being taken seriously. And I knew from talking to Vitalik privately that 1, his April Fool's joke is not really a joke, except for maybe the title. 2, he didn't actually agree with my criticisms. And 3, he was happy to troll me by letting it ride as a joke instead of correcting the record, which I thought happened at my expense. And at that point, I realized I don't feel obligated to extend grace to anyone who doesn't extend it to me. I attempted diplomacy and failed. It's time for war. So the enemy is Marxism in this equation. It's a false god. This is Yuri Bezmenov, ex-KGB guy. I've been writing about this for a while. The date on this is, July 2020. So he explains how ideological subversion works. Psychological warfare, it changes the perception of reality to such an extent that despite the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their family, their community, and their country. And he lays out the path that it follows. And so the Russian KGB strategy is basically to send Marxism into everyone else's societies to weaken their societies. It's a form of religious war. And so it goes from an open society, egalitarianism, you get your expectations up, we're all equal. And then the aspirations versus reality kick in, people get upset, there's discontent, the productivity goes down, there's inflation and unemployment, recession, social unrest, instability, radicalism, power struggle, replacement, civil war. We're probably somewhere in the radicalism, instability part. I'm grateful that Trump may be able to set things right, but it's an uphill battle. And this also describes this sort of summarized in stages, which is you demoralize people, you educate an entire generation in Marxist ideology. This is like a 20, 30-year plan, by the way. This isn't like a 10-year, 5-year. And then you destabilize it, and then it leads to a crisis, and then you normalize, which means there's a period of stability, but it ends up in a closed society. My pinned tweet, if you don't follow me, you should follow me, and you should read this article. I put it together. This is what the West can learn from the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979. The meme here is Iranians in the West watching Marxists march with Islamists, and it's like the Vietnam dog meme. We're just like traumatized. The reason Marxism is dangerous, it cost us our country, is that basically they teamed up with the Islamists to which they had nothing in common with except for hating the USA, and in order to run cover for the Islamist propaganda, which eventually cost Iranians our country. And the Shah, who they saw as a US puppet, was actually doing a pretty good job of defending Iran's interests in terms of getting like decent oil deals that favored Iran, which is actually why the CIA was mad at him, and the British Petroleum Company and the UK were also mad at him. It doesn't matter how much you actually have your own nation's interests at heart, the Marxists don't care. And the this is like a leftist woman who is putting Khomeini manifest. It might as well have been my mother. I was raised by a communist mother and a Muslim father. My mom is no longer Muslim or communist, and my dad is no longer Muslim. We have a lot of regrets in my family. And so after the revolution, women lost basically all of the freedoms that they had. And the Islamists started executing the communists that the Shah had in prison. That's when the communists knew they fucked up. And then Khomeini has like the worst track record of any leader, where he got in power for 1 year, started an 8-year war with Iraq, and then which cost 1 million lives and accomplished nothing, and then died 1 year after it ended. This is Khomeini. This is one of the things that he said that was in the mandated religious scripture inside of Iran. This is the Ayatollah, the supreme leader. Questioning him is basically punishable by death. But, you know, it's important to, I'm not even going to get into this. So what does this have to do with Ethereum, right? I have learned to identify Marxist infiltration when I see it. And I raise the alarm about it, and I try to point it out to people, and I have mixed results. So the tweet on the left is, you know, a result. People tell me that Ethereum doesn't have cultural problems, but then this guy, whose handle is the blockchain socialist, is really excited about talking about communism. Let me say the C word, you know. And then Martin Koppelman, who I have a lot of respect for, is a great builder, you know, Gnosis CEO. They build the safe and everything. He comments with this tagline: fully automated luxury gay space communism contracts. And I think Circles is kind of retarded. We had a whole Twitter space about why Circles is retarded. I wrote a thread about it. You can go look it up. But at the end of the thread, I lost my shit because he didn't even realize that the whole gay space communism meme comes from an Iranian Marxist in the UK, who is also himself an Islamist sympathizer. When I looked up his tweets, it's like, you know, anything related to the grooming gangs, for example, in the UK, nothing. Anything, you know, there's like Muslim Pakistanis raping UK girls all the time. It's horrific. But he does have a lot to say about Islamophobia, and this is the way that your society gets destroyed. These people, you do not hate them enough. And so it was shocking to me to see the propaganda, the guy that wrote this guy's book as the tagline of the Circles contracts. And especially with Martin not even being aware of it. So this is somebody agreeing with me, which I encourage you all to do, about the problems with Gitcoin communism. Most people don't get to experience it. Every DAO is infested with refi solarpunk grifters that pretend to be acting in the ecosystem interest only to extract as much money, champagne socialists, exactly who we were talking about. And this is just emblematic of the reach of the Marxist ideology and the problems that they cause. On the right is Brantley. Who remembers Brantley? Show of hands. Anyone? All right, like half of you. Brantley got fired from ENS because a woke mob stormed and demanded that he be fired, and Nick Johnson fired him. And even though he won the DAO vote, which said that he should stay, people said we feel unsafe around his Catholic ideas, even though Brantley is like one of the most tolerant people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. We could all be like Brantley. I also got canceled once for saying something anti-Semitic in 2019 as a joke. I love Jews. But the funny thing is that I'm pretty sure almost all of the people who canceled me for saying that actually were marching with the you know, pro-Hamas groups all over, you know, New York and other universities. Makes no sense. So other places that this shows up is Trent for example, who runs Protocol Guild, he had a comment. I'm calling for a pause on Ethereum discourse until we figure out how woke popped up last week. What's going on here? And I try to explain. I'm like, okay, woke is a manifestation of Marxism. It's not about like proletariat class stuff. It's about race, gender, sexuality. Prioritize the surface over essences. You try to say the right words and look right, but you kind of ignore actual bad things, right? It's like Hamas are a bunch of genocidal rapists, but we're like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. Suicidal empathy. If you're like a queer person going out for Hamas, that like I encourage you to go to Gaza. They'll just throw you off a roof. So you can tell something is a sacred cow when people refuse to even talk about it. In this case, Trent started a conversation with me about wokeism and then refused to elaborate. I'm like, what do you think it is? And he's like, I'm not spending my time on this. I don't want to talk about this, And it's like, okay, well, why'd you bring it up? And Awaki and Vitalik did the same thing to me when they trolled me for bringing up Gitcoin commies. They did not discuss my criticisms. They just trolled me. I wish it didn't matter, right? I wish I could just be like, you think whatever you want, and that's fine with me. But unfortunately, it does matter because it makes its way into policy. And so, for example, this is Constantine saying we should fund a second foundation. Trent's going, it's already happening. We want Protocol Guild to be the second foundation. And I comment on that, and I'm like, hey, man, as long as this thing is communist, everybody gets paid the same. I'm making a remark about like the funding mechanism, right? And so Protocol Guild had everybody essentially on tenure where everybody was getting the same amount, and the only thing that mattered is how long you were there. And so the incentives it creates are just do the minimum amount of work to stay on the stream. It does not incentivize anybody to do anything above and beyond. And so Trent does not care, ignores this, does not think it's a priority. And I mean, to his credit, they finally have started adding the, exploring the idea of putting weights on streams. But the reason I pick on him also is because I helped start what became Protocol Guild when I was running Moloch DAO. Show of hands, who even knows what Moloch DAO is here? Okay, most of you, cool. So we incepted this. The founder of Etherealize came up to me and he's like, hey man, I want to give a bunch of money to a bunch of Ethereum researchers and core devs. And we're like, okay, we made a spreadsheet, we assigned weights to everybody. Trent's only job was assigning addresses to people. So he was gonna go gather addresses. And then we got Danny Ryan, who you'll hear more about, to ratify all the weights that we had. So it didn't start communist, but then it became communist. It's very, very frustrating. I started begging Danny Ryan to come back publicly because he left, and I thought it would only be a matter of time before we all did. People don't realize the critical role that he played in our ecosystem. The screenshot that we have there is from the first report that Moloch DAO ever published in 2019, and it was a result of us interviewing all the core dev teams, the ETH2 teams, the researchers, figuring out like, who do you talk to, where do you get your marching orders, what do you need, how big's your team, how much resources do you have, basically put together a report as basically outside consultants. One of the things that we figured out was that Danny had stepped up into this leadership role, a pseudo leadership role. He'd never been actually formally recognized for it because, the Ethereum Foundation doesn't really do that. But we, after finding him, allowed him to be promoted internally to being this sort of central nexus that connected all of the researchers and all the core teams. He was technical enough and social enough to be that bridge. So we wanted to put him in charge of the Ethereum Foundation. This was the result of a vote to see if that was worth doing. It's overwhelmingly in his favor. It's what, 95, yeah, it's like $150 million or something. And Vitalik shut us down. This is like the only thing that everybody in Ethereum agreed on. Was put Danny Ryan in charge. And Vitalik said, this is not how the game works. The person deciding the new EF leadership team is me. One of the goals of the ongoing reform is to give EF a proper board, but until that happens, it's me. Okay. If you keep the pressure on, then you are creating an environment that is actively toxic to top talent. Some of Ethereum's best devs have been messaging me recently, expressing their disgust with the social media environment. You are making my job harder. And you are decreasing the chance that I have any interest in doing what you want, milady. And so, you know, I thought this was a bunch of bullshit because the problem with me is I help bury all these bodies, you know? So when I just called out Aya, I'm like, okay, Aya, do you remember the time that you called me and asked me to continue being toxic to Lane Reddig because you didn't like him and wanted him out? Awkward. So yeah, V basically used that toxicity to shut us down, and with no response to any of the points about Aya being toxic herself or endorsing it when it benefits her, and so forth. And then he basically ignored all of our comments and lumped us in with some minority Twitter personalities who were being somewhat toxic, admittedly, but used that as an excuse to ignore all of us. Did it again here. He commented on someone's suicidal plea for help in order to cast us in a negative light and say that we make him want to quit Ethereum. And so we should basically go away and be quiet. And thankfully, we have some Ethereum meme lords who broke this down. So he said, when people with no understanding of the Ethereum Foundation, internals tell me exactly who I should rip out of the organization, who I should throw in. On top of that, expect it all to get done within 2 weeks. I said, no, I do not feel good about hearing these things. These are even times that make me the emotional desire to quit. And then this guy, JRAG, said, this is masterful narrative control. This is what we should be doing. We should be learning how Vitalik plays this game. So he's saying if you are asking for change, you are now grouped with like VC firms giving him thoughts about quitting. No one wants that. We love Vitalik. Be patient means anybody who proposes this appears toxic because we're asking for urgency. People with no understanding of the EF, so he's just insulting all of our knowledge of how any of this works. And to top it off, at the bottom, it's like it's wrapped in a "don't kill yourself" post. So you're just done. You can't argue with that. So Vitalik is the problem. Rumor has it that Danny's condition for returning was to be the sole executive director. So far, V has blocked this, called us all toxic for asking. Some suspect that this is due to Danny being an American, essentially a DEI move, and others suspect that it's V being jealous of Danny's popularity. So this guy, who is the guy I was calling out for Gitcoin commie in the beginning, said, the issue with wokeism is in the workplace is recruiting. If they start choosing their own tribe more than the best man for the job. And I'm like, exactly. In what world is anyone other than Danny Ryan the most qualified for the Ethereum executive director position? The culture problem goes up to the top, and this is why it's important. Danny is the people's choice. If you don't know, that's Danny Ryan. Who is actually stepping up to the plate to rep Ethereum. So like Danny's one of the only people who can do a great job at representing the Ethereum Foundation protocol publicly. He's technical, he's charming, he's jacked. Put him in. And so as a result of this, we have to fight Vitalik. When Vitalik said, I am the board, I make all the decisions, he also basically identified himself as the responsible party for everything that we were previously scapegoating Aya for, which is kind of a mindfuck because it's like, bro, you put her as the executive director, even though you run everything, in order to have a scapegoat. And then when we scapegoated her, you got mad at us for scapegoating her. But the solution to this is holding Vitalik accountable and normalizing that. So, for example, he posted, about the 10x scaling. All of a sudden, in the year of our Lord, 2025, he decided that Ethereum needs to scale the base layer by at least 10 times or more, which we could have started 2 years ago, 3 years ago, at any time before that. And so it's worth asking, hey, why didn't we do this? Whose job was it to figure this out? And what's the problem? So, I brought this up to Iwaki. Iwaki had some tweet. He was saying we'd like wandered around, and then Solana basically showed us that we had product market fit. I'm like, what took us so long to get there? And so I asked, whose job was this? And he didn't respond because that's not a thing we do. We don't talk about Vitalik. It's like Voldemort. And so, another response to that question was Zaki saying the answer is that Ethereum does not have engineering problems executives. Danny. You have research execs like Justin. There isn't anyone who wakes up and tries to figure out how to get the extra 10% improvement on 100 different subcomponents. I said it's worse than that. We actually don't even know that we're missing engineering executives. That's not a problem that is registered for us. Until we can discuss the V word, he who shall not be named, the Dark Lord Voldemort, we will continue to make the same mistakes. This is another Ethereum core dev, Preston, and in response to being like, hey, what was the problem here? He's like, sure, a retrospective might be productive, but it doesn't do much to solve the current problems. And I disagree. I think if the same people are making the same mistakes, then it is a problem. And so, it's one word and it starts with V. And I'll this was tweeted today by Joseph Schweitzer, and it's mind-boggling the mental gymnastics that are required to tweet something like this. Frankly speaking, if the EF had too competent of an official wallet team, web team, client team, funding mechanism, we wouldn't have had the alternatives that we see today. Much of that is by design, help others grow, help others connect. And it's like, it's basically saying our incompetence is actually for your benefit. And I don't agree. I think we should normalize holding Vitalik accountable for the incompetence of the Ethereum Foundation. So part of doing this is identifying the ways that Vitalik is our cult leader, identifying, how cult leadership works, and destroying it, his whole cult of personality. So I recommend everybody read this blog post by Ayla Girl of Gangbang fame. It's called Frame Control. Just like type in Ayla Frame Control. Don't type in like Ayla anything else. But it's basically pickup artistry for cult leaders, and you'll enjoy it. The reason that she knows about this stuff is because she had to break out of, like, her father was like a Christian pastor. And I identify with some of this because my dad was, very radical Islamists, growing up, and like I said, we had to both overcome all that. So, anyways, a lot of other people are going to talk about the wonders that we're building. I wanted to talk about destroying the religious fanatics, but we should remember that when we are done destroying the religious fanatics, we will go back to building the wonders. Thank you.